Welcome to Election Speakout. The Committee to Restore Districts expresses our thanks to MetroEast for the opportunity to inform Gresham residents about Measure 26-141, Mayor at Large, Councilors by District. Gresham, with a population of 107,000 residents, has become a large, diverse community. The larger and more diverse we grow, the more important and the more difficult it becomes for citizen councilors to identify concerns in areas within the city. Requiring the city councilors to live in the district they represent is really a simple concept, but it has far-reaching and profound effects. I'm Chuck Becker, former city councilor and Gresham mayor, and professor emeritus, Portland State University. With me is Jack Ardner, who is chair of the Committee to Restore Districts and a retired federal government employee with 35 years of service. Both of us are long-term Gresham citizens. What is Measure 26-141? It would change how the city councilors are elected. Measure 26-141 would do three things: establish 6 districts of equal population. 2, require councilors to live in their district. 3, only voters who live within the district would vote for the councilor. Measure 26-141 is not a measure to maintain the status quo. Electing councilors by district would balance representation throughout the city and open the doors of opportunity for users and citizens with critical issues that cover the entire city but also reach within their own area that they live. Jack, what promised the grassroots effort to change the way the Gresham City Councilors are elected?
This is a great story. It really is. It began when the Gresham Charter Review Commission chose to not recommend dealing with districts for councilors and putting it on the ballot last May. A citizens group was formed and, following the Oregon statutes, provided an initiative petition to the city. It was approved by the city for gathering signatures, and in the process, we were required to have 1,400 signatures to make it valid. At the time, we were told nobody's interested in this subject. It's amazing. When we went out to gather signatures, we found that people were willing to sign when they were approached. We found that they would have a reaction, and we showed them a map that showed the population of the city by neighborhood, and we showed them another map on this side that shows where the councilors live. And when they saw those two maps, they would react, well, isn't this the way it should be? Isn't this the way we do it now? And of course we had to say no, we elect councilors by position.
You had a real mismatch then between representation and where councilors actually live today.
And that's what was showing on that map.
Did you use paid petitioners for gathering these signatures in such a rapid way?
No, we did not. We did not. In the process, though, we were quite successful in getting the signatures necessary and putting this measure then on the ballot for November.
So the petition ended up actually developing a ballot measure for voters to vote on.
That's correct.
I understand that, this has some requirements in it. What actually does it require as far as voting districts?
Well, this is a tool that, if the voters approve it, this is a tool that the city council would use to establish 6 districts of equal population throughout the city, covering the whole city. It would be established under the rules and guidelines that the city council would provide, and it would have to meet federal, state, county regulations and laws.
Very good.
The final say on it, the final approval of where the boundaries are, is all done by the city council.
By the city council. Then, it's also been said that Measure 26-141, if passed, would give voters fewer choices to vote. Is this true?
No, it is not true. In fact, that's an urban myth. The reality is, from the earliest days of our Constitution, representative government was established with federal representatives, and the principle of one person, one vote was clearly established. This is then shown, and we see it today. Moving forward in history, we see it today at the federal level, at the state level, at the county level, and even some smaller areas within the county. They all have voting districts. It is very common. But speaking of choices to vote, let me talk just a minute about the 2010 election.
Okay.
In the 2010 election, there were 3 councilors up for election. 2 of those races were contested. One of them had no other applicant. The mayor also had no opposition. So in looking at the voting data from the county, something was really clear. I found that when voters actually submitted their ballot to the county, that 36% of those voters chose not to make a mark for either one or the 2 of the candidates at all.
Wow.
And where it's uncontested, that number jumped up to 45%.
Wow.
45%. So that
really shows a disengagement with the public, and some apathy, and definitely apathy within the interest of governance in the city of Gresham. If we don't have any applicants, and if the voters themselves choose not to express the right to vote, that's pretty bad. That's pretty outstanding. If, and when we come to that, it's really important, I think, that we recognize if people who did not vote for a counselor because they didn't feel that they had a choice, or there wasn't a choice presented for them with either one or the other, this really shows that they need to support and vote for Measure 26-141, because Measure 26-141 would encourage people to become more involved, because they would have a counselor in their own district that they could converse with and have that information brought forth to the council, where the council could have a conversation amongst themselves in the best interest of the district and also of the entire city. This is great, Jack, but I also see that there's some comments out there that have been passed by that this is really a divisive measure. Do you see it as a divisive measure?
Well, as I described earlier, this is simply a tool that we would provide to the city council, a tool which they would implement. They would be in control. What really is divisive, though, is some of the things that we ran into along the way. During the signature gathering process that was provided for under our state constitution, that citizens can petition their government, the city council chose to issue a resolution number 3103, encouraging citizens not to sign this.
Oh, my.
They issued a letter, a Dear Neighbor letter, saying that there was a risk of gerrymandering and divisiveness. And we scratched our head and wondered what that was about. Are they really saying that if they had this tool, that they would implement it in such a way that they would gerrymander the city or cause it to be divisive?
Wow.
This is really strange. But then just 2 weeks ago, the mayor on his website and on his page indicated that this petition, which is now a measure for the people to vote on, he called it a distraction.
Well, I don't think it's a distraction. I think this is an opportunity for people to step up and be heard and listened to. With all of this measure and the divisiveness claim, who then is really opposed to this measure? I don't see the citizens as being opposed. Is there something else that I don't see?
Currently, the mayor and a majority of the councilors have formally gone on record as opposing this measure through that. And in addition to that, many or several community business leaders and other community leaders have expressed opposition. They seem to prefer the status quo, where the majority of people on the council live in just a small area. This is really not the vision that we have. This measure has a different vision, one of equal representation with districts of equal population, counselors living in the district, and people being able to know their counselor and to communicate with them and to participate in democracy.
I think I saw a map, and maybe it's one that you presented earlier when we started, and that is that of the 6 counselors, they live in 4 neighborhoods. That leaves 12 neighborhoods unrepresented in the city. This has been interesting, Jack, and I think what we want to do is kind of summarize this, and maybe I can go into a closing statement. And let's say that there are many ways to elect city councilors. Small cities practice at large because they're small, they know their people, they're maybe even their neighbors that are candidates for these positions. Larger cities prefer the election of city councilors by district. Gresham is a large city, and it's continuing to grow, and it's going to get larger, and we want to ensure the citizens that they are provided with an equal voice, equal representation, transparency in governments, and accountability. Measure 2141, I think, is this simple measure that is going to provide these profound results or outcomes. Measure 26141 points the power of the vote to the people. People have a vote, one person, one vote. Last year, I think what is important here is we need to have the people voice their vote, present their voice, present their vote, and make sure that Measure 26141 passes. I think that what they will have is they will have equal voice, equal representation, transparency, and they will have accountability because they will know who their counselors are and to whom they may go. Jack, this has been great. Thanks very much for the opportunity, and thanks for the viewers for listening to our presentation.
Voting is a big deal and one of the most powerful things you can do. But deep down, people vote because
I vote for my family.
I vote because every voice does matter.
Because my grandmother couldn't.
Because democracy only works if you participate.
I vote because if I want my voice to be heard, the first thing I must do is vote.
I vote for more bike lanes.
For cleaner streams.
For more jobs.
For the future of the arts.
I vote because I want a say in where my tax dollars go.
Because of all the women who ensure my right to vote.
Because I did last year.
Because it's easy.
I vote because it's my civic duty.
And I vote because I can. Register, engage, vote. It's in your hands.
The League of Women Voters makes history.
Our country would not be the same without their dedication.
Formed by women who organized to win women the right to vote.
It is now a co-ed organization.
Studying, informing, and acting.
Nonpartisan.
Grassroots.
Influential.
Taking political stance on many issues.
The League of Women Voters encourages all citizens to be informed and active in government.
Join the League of Women Voters of East Multnomah County in making history today.
Welcome to Election Speakout. Good evening, and my name is Marlene Byrne, and I am the Voter Service Chair of the League of Women Voters of East Multnomah County, or EMCO, as we're called. And this is Susan Foster, who's a member of EMCO, and she has been my right-hand man, or woman, excuse me, this season. First of all, let me tell you a little bit about the League. We have had a long history in Oregon and nationally. We were formed in 1920 in anticipation of the 19th Amendment, which gives the women the right to vote. And from the very beginning, our aim has been to educate the voter and the citizens on the measures that the League has voted on, has studied and reached a consensus on. And the League can support any improved legislation, either locally, statewide, or nationally. The League of Women Voters is a political, nonpartisan organization. Now, before the presentation begins, I want to tell you a little bit about some of the basic voting patterns in East Multnomah County and Oregon. As you know, Oregon has a vote-by-mail election only. Now, to be able to vote, you must have been registered by the 16th of October, and you have to register with your party affiliation. And you have to do all this by October 16th. The ballots are going to be mailed October 19th to 23rd to all registered voters. Now, remember, if you do not receive a ballot, to go to www.oregonvotes.com, and you will tell them and let them know. Or you can call your elections bureau and let them know that you did not receive your ballot. Then on November 6th, vote. Most important, vote. Remember, postmarks on that date don't count, and they don't make you have a good ballot. So get that voting done. Another very important website that we think is very easy and efficient is Vote 411. To do that, you just enter the website 411, press enter, .org, press enter, and then you put in your address, including your zip code, and hit enter again, and up pops all the information that is pertinent to your address only. Your address. I think that is about all of the things that we have to go over for 411, and now I'm going to give you to Susan, and she's going to begin our presentation.
Well, thank you, Marlene. What I thought we would do tonight is spend our time talking about those measures which may have the most impact in East County, Gresham, and the other three cities, in the Gresham and the East County area. One of these in particular is a local issue, and that's for the election of a mayor and councilors. This is it would be a charter amendment. It was put on the ballot by initiative petition. It was recommended by the Charter Review Committee that studied the charter for 2 years, but was not accepted at City Council. Since then, there has been an initiative petition campaign, and they filed, and this is now on the ballot. The question they're asking you, should the Gresham Charter be amended to elect the mayor at large and the councilors who would be living in 6 districts? You would have to have the councilor to be elected from a single district and would have to live in that district. This is thought to be, I think you're going to hear more about that from other folks in the area. I think there was a program on just previous to us that talked about this in more detail. But generally speaking, the citizens who are in favor of this believe that the citizens in every neighborhood in Gresham will have a voice. Citizens will know which counselor to contact for help involving solving their district and also city problems. The counselors will be accountable to the citizens in their districts, and citizens who know their districts will be encouraged to run for city council. It increases the ethnic, economic, and democratic diversity and geographical representation. And Marlene, I think you have some things to say on both con and financial information?
Well, first of all, let me say, both the voter's guide and all the information I have seen, that they show no financial impact at this whatsoever. But the opponents do say that the at-large elections, they give everybody an opportunity to serve their city. And it elevates the needs for the entire community after completing individual agendas. Also, the current system of at-large elections, voters elect the 6 best candidates citywide for 4-year terms. With redistricting, you vote for all 6, and your vote for all 6 would be sacrificed, and your vote will be diminished.
Thank you. It is a decision that each of you has to think about seriously, as all of these are, and consider if you would prefer to have vote for all of the councilors, or if the mayor in either case will be elected at large by the whole city, or if you would prefer to vote for your councilor in a district. I think that it is self-explanatory, and I think you folks are good about reading the information. Vote papers, the voter's guide that is the printed voter's guide, out of which also Vote for 11 has been formed, is now available in East County. So you'll look in libraries and retirement homes and so on. So you have a number of sources to get information. And it's important that you educate yourself to vote, as Marlene has said, which is quite true. A second issue out here that I think is an important issue, but I've heard very little, if anything, about it for this election, and that is to determine a permanent levy for the Multnomah County Library. The question the levy asked, it was put on the ballot by a 100% vote in favor of this by the entire Multnomah County Commissioners. And the question is, should dedicated library district fund Multnomah County library hours, services, and rate limited to $100.24 per thousand assessment begin in 2013. The financial impact on this is a little different. There's a temporary levy, a 3-year temporary levy at the present time, and it levies somewhat less than that. It's, I think it's, 98 cents? Or, about 98 cents per 1,000. So there's a little increase in the amount of money that would be required with a permanent levy, but there's a difference between a temporary levy and a permanent levy. The temporary levy is subjected to compression. Now, we had lots of talks about compression in other elections. The state allows $10 per 1,000 to be allotted to tax measures that appear on the ballot, so that all the tax measures that pass have to be within that $10 limitation per 1,000 on taxes on houses. What this means is, if you pass 6 or 7 new ones on top of the ones we also already have, each levy will not get its full amount. And they will make a ratio or a judgment between these levies, how much each levy will get of their amount that they are trying to assess. In fact, the limit set by Measure 5 in 1990, the taxes were increased by as much as 35 cents per 1,000 of assessed value up to the $10 limit. What happened is, because there were so many other tax measures, the levy has never been able to collect the full amount of funding that the voters passed for it. With a permanent levy, it is not subjected to, it's a taxing district and is not subjected to compression. If you yes vote for this measure, the library would receive its tax funding through a permanent tax base and would no longer require county general funds. If the no vote would mean that we would stay the same and the library would continue to request funding every 3 to 5 years through temporary levies and would continue to ask for support from the county general fund. This adds a stability to the library, in terms of hours, they've had to decrease their hours even though they passed the levy in May. They were not able to fund fully the levy due to compression. And this has created problems in terms of keeping our libraries open sufficiently long as we would like them to be. Supporters of the levy say that the library needs permanent funding. It needs a stable fund base, as in this case a tax base, a tax district. Then the stable funding so that the services of the library can be maintained and long-range planning can be done. The county residents have determined their issue, demonstrated demonstrated their desire for a good library system. And Multnomah County is well known across the entire United States as a good library system. It has the second highest circulation rate in the country, and that's the whole of the United States, and that rate has been increasing. The library is one of the most efficient systems with one of the lowest cost per circulated items. And the elected Multnomah County Board of Commissioners will remain the governing board for the library and will continue to exercise local control. The library will also continue to be subject to periodic audits by the elected county auditor acting independently of the Board of Commissioners. I told you what the financial impact is. The opponents to this measure say that creating a permanent tax district for the library would adversely affect other local government programs, each such as the Children's Levy and the Oregon Historical Society levy, because again, the downturn in property values has increased the effects of Measure 5 and Measure 50. Voters should be able to periodically review library funding, and the county library is already better funded than almost most urban libraries, and there is no need for a new funding base. So I don't know. It's up to you to decide this kind of a system, but you need to keep in mind the idea of compression. And one thing that the vote paper that we have and are distributing at this time has a section on compression and what compression and property taxes, how they relate, and what it means in terms of local government. I think that would, unless you have some questions, Marlene, I think that pretty much covers.
No, I think we can go on to Ballot Measure 80.
Right. We were asked to talk about certain specific measures.
Yes.
So here we are, folks. This is one with which some people who are talking about it have very little experience. But this is Measure 80, and Measure 80 is the marijuana legalization. The marijuana legalization would change the state law at the present time, but would have no effect whatsoever on federal law. The federal law bans the sale, the use, and sale, use, and production of marijuana. The title of this is it allows personal marijuana, hemp cultivation, use without a license, and they will create a commission to regulate commercial cultivation and sale. This is a statutory measure put on the ballot by initiative petition.
Great.
Financial.
And now the financial impact. The financial impact is quite long and lengthy. And the cost of operating the Cannabis Commission will be similar to that of the Oregon Liquor Control Commission, which is approximately $22 million a year. Now, the total revenues to state government are very indeterminate, but the revenues from the sale and the tax of marijuana are likely to be sufficient to offset the expenditures of the commission. So the state expenditures will be reduced by 1.4 to 2.4 million a year. Now, the state pays for felony marijuana offenders with related convictions in the prison and probation. It's not yet determined the number and the difficulty of the federal challenges to the Oregon law. making the potential impact really unpredictable. It's a possible 1.6 to 3.3 million a year in court cost cases. And the impact on local law enforcement, district attorneys, and courts, they are all indeterminate.
A yes vote on this measure would pass the measure, and it would replace all existing state and local laws relating to marijuana except for the medical marijuana laws. It would also not affect the laws on driving under the influence of intoxicants, marijuana being classified as one. Personal use and cultivation of marijuana would be permitted. Marijuana would be regulated and sold in state licensed stores and taxed similar to liquor. Federal law, on the other hand, prohibits that cultivation, the sale and use of marijuana, and it will not be changed as a result of this measure, and therefore there will be a conflict, an ensuing conflict over the state law and the federal law. No means that the situation will stay the same as it is now, that marijuana is not legal to sell, use, or cultivate except for the medical marijuana program in Oregon. In 1935, marijuana was legal in Oregon and a whole lot of other states. 1973, Oregon decriminalized small amounts, something less than an ounce, and determined it was a misdemeanor. 1986, the voters of Oregon defeated a measure that's very similar to the one in front of you now, which would have made marijuana cultivation and use legal. In 1998, Oregon voters passed the medical marijuana law allowing the use for medicinal purposes. And in 2010, we defeated the tax that would have allowed medical marijuana dispensaries. Hemp consists of, it is one of the strains of cannabis sativa, which is the scientific name of marijuana. It has less than 0.3% THC, which is a psychoactive compound in marijuana. In 2009, however, the Oregon legislature passed a law to allow and establish the cultivation of industrial hemp, should the federal law change to permit cultivation. Measure 80 would amend the state law to allow, again, regulated growth, sales, possession of marijuana. The Cannabis Commission is set up to license qualified growers, license processors and packages, license stores to sell marijuana, set standards, establish retail prices for marijuana, and collect fees. The revenues that would come from this are distributed by the Commission. The first thing is they would reimburse the Commission for expenses, the Attorney General's office for the costs of enforcing and defending the measure, and license retailers for paying the 15% of gross sales. By paying them the 15% of gross sales. The remainder of the monies that are left, 90% would go to the general fund, 7% to fund drug treatment, 1% to create and fund a committee to promote Oregon hemp fiber, 1% to create and fund a committee to develop and promote biodiesel from hemp seeds, and 1% to state school districts for drug education programs. This bill would also require that the state attorney general defend the law in federal courts and to defend Oregon citizens from prosecution. The supporters for this say that, like liquor, cannabis would be only sold to adults 21 and older. And we would keep all our DUI laws, so driving shouldn't be a problem. Regulate the growth and sale would probably diminish the black market on revenue generated for the state while reducing the amount spent on law enforcement and prisons, and allow the industrial production of hemp without state regulation. And it would lead to job creation in the cannabis industries. The opponents, however,
the opponents say that while there is a greater availability, the youth will not be able to legally purchase it, but that availability is there, such as it is with alcohol, and they would have greater access, which could lead to drug abuse and crime. And passing this measure would be a legal nightmare for Oregon, since the federal law would still prohibit marijuana. Any increase in revenue is not worth the impact on the community and the youth. And if passed, drug cartels would monopolize the market, decreasing public safety and increasing law enforcement costs. And the last but not least, it would undermine the public health and safety in Oregon.
The last issues that we will talk about today are 3 in number. It's Measure 82 and 83 that deal with privately owned casinos, and the measure in Wood Village for the vote by the host city to allow or not allow the casino to be built in their city or town. Measure 82 allows privately owned casinos. It's a constitutional amendment, and it would authorize the establishment of privately owned casinos and mandate percentage of revenues payable to a dedicated state fund. The League of Women Voters has, throughout its history, cautioned people to be careful with constitutional amendments. Once they are placed in the Constitution, they are very difficult, near to impossible, to remove. It requires a 2/3 vote of all members of the 2 houses in order to remove something from the Constitution. Now, it sounds simple, but it rarely is ever done. There's an indeterminate financial impact, I think. You have any ideas on this?
Yes. As you said, the financial impact is indeterminate. And if it's established, the Oregon Lottery, especially the video lottery, would have less revenue, between 32 and 54 million. And that depends on some assumptions. And that includes that you have 300 million in investment in the casino property itself, and 2,200 or 2,200 slot machines and 100 table games.
Sounds interesting. If you vote yes for Measure 82 and it passes, it would amend the Constitution to authorize the voters of the state and host city to approve privately owned casinos. It would require such casinos to give 25% of their monthly adjusted gross revenues to the state lottery for specific purposes. Those purposes, such as it says, have to do with education funds and so on. If it's voted down or it fails, the current law would be maintained, which does not allow privately owned casinos within the state. Supporters of this particular measure say that it's a good idea because it would provide us with jobs, needed jobs, and provide economic development. Oregon voters should allow non-tribal casinos so that the state could benefit economically. They also say that privately owned casinos will give 25% of the adjusted gross revenue to important public needs like education, local governments, and law enforcement. To minimize competition with tribal casinos, privately owned casinos would only be allowed in cities no closer than 60 miles from an existing tribal casino.
Now, our opponents say that it could negatively impact the jobs in small businesses, especially the video lottery games. And the Oregon Lottery currently benefits Oregon, and it would primarily benefit the public investors. And most revenues are generated in the Portland area, and the casinos would reduce revenues, which are important to the city and the state. And tribal casinos are a major source of jobs and revenue for the tribes. And the public lottery or public commission in Oregon could reduce the amount of revenue that goes to these tribal casinos to help their own community.
The lottery, by law, 84% of the total amount of the lottery revenues must be returned to the public. 50% as prizes, and the remainder for public purposes: education, state parks, watershed conservation, and salmon habitat. And in addition to these statewide allocations, every county receives a portion of the net receipts for local economic projects. So, yes vote, It would amend the Constitution to authorize voters of the state and host city to approve of privately owned casinos. It would require such casinos to give 25% of their monthly adjusted gross revenues to the state lottery for specific purposes. If the measure fails, then the current law would be maintained, which does not allow privately owned casinos within the state, and tribal casinos are authorized by gaming compact between state, federal, and tribal governments. Measure 83 is a companion to this, and it would allow the casino to be placed in Wood Village at the old Multnomah Greyhound Park. Again, it's a statutory measure and is placed on the ballot by initiative petition. The probable yes vote would authorize single privately owned casino in Wood Village and require 25% of the adjusted gross revenues to the state lottery. A no vote would say that current law is maintained and no privately owned casino would be built in Wood Village. The vote by the city of Wood Village is a yes or no vote, and if 82 and 83 pass, their vote would authorize from the citizens of Wood Village whether they would allow or would not allow a casino to be built in their town. Measure 83 depends on the passage of 82. It repeals the constitutional prohibition of non-tribal. The revenue distribution of the 25% is 80% to the lottery, and for 58%, out of that 80%, 58% goes to education, 4% to local governments, and the remainder to other public purposes. The remaining 20% of the monies would be distributed too many numbers, I know. 75% to local government, 15% to tribal governments, and 5% each to Oregon State Police and the Problem Gaming Treatment Fund. Supporters say that 3,000 temporary jobs and 2,000 permanent jobs with benefits would be produced. It could be a positive economic impact on the area. It provides money to give back to the lottery and benefits state and local government. It would be the first tax-paying casino in the state, paying gaming, property income, hospitality, TriMet taxes, and could generate needed funds for school. It's a new entertainment option for Wood Village and would attract tourists and possibly bring in out-of-state monies to Oregon. Almost done.
Again, this measure is indeterminate, and if it is constructed, the Oregon State Lottery would receive between 32 and 54 million in additional net revenue. And this would depend on the number of gaming tables they had and also the amount that they have put in as an investment.
I don't know, how are we doing? Are we 3 minutes? We had thought that we might talk about another measure, but I think I'd like to talk a little more about this particular measure because it's abolishing a tax I'm sorry, I'm at the wrong place. But the casino measure is one that it should be of great concern to people. They need to consider how it impacts their local villages and towns, Wood Village, Fairview, Gresham, and Troutdale, and how they will deal with that kind of influx into the city. It may be tremendously positive, but that's what each one of us will have to make up our mind by ourselves.
Okay, now I want to close, and first of all, I want to thank MetroEast for having us here and giving us a chance to speak to you, the voter, and giving you a chance to make up your mind on how you're going to vote for these ballot measures. The last thing I want to tell you is that there is another website you can go to, and that is www.oregonvoters.org. And when you enter this site, you will get a full context of the ballot measures. So for you political junkies out there who are really political junkies, you might want to get the whole ballot measure. Yes. Again, I want to thank MetroEast for having us and letting us speak out, and to you, the voter, for wanting to be an educated voter and voting. Thank you.
is a big deal and one of the most powerful things you can do. But deep down, people vote because
I vote for my family.
I vote because every voice does matter.
Because my grandmother couldn't.
Because democracy only works if you participate.
I vote because if I want my voice to be heard, the first thing I must do is vote.
I vote for more bike lanes.
For cleaner streams.
For more jobs.
For the future of the arts.
I vote because I want a say in where my tax dollars go.
Because of all the women who ensure my right to vote.
Because I did last year.
Because it's easy.
I vote because it's my civic duty.
And I vote because I can. Register, engage, vote. It's in your hands.
The League of Women Voters makes history.
Our country would not be the same without their dedication.
Formed by women who organized to win women the right to vote.
It is now a co-ed organization.
Studying, informing, and acting.
Nonpartisan.
Grassroots.
Influential.
Taking political stance on many issues.
The League of Women Voters encourages all citizens to be informed and active in government.
Join the League of Women Voters of East Multnomah County in making history today.
If you took away a star for every 1 million people who didn't vote, and a stripe for every 5 million non-voters, and a patch of blue for the 10 million people who didn't care, exactly what kind of flag are we waving?